independence.
Okay, let's just pause here and let's broaden the discussion and talk about the principle of EU membership. And we're now going to go to Nigel Farage in London, I hope. Yes, Nigel, thanks for joining us this evening. You believe that neither Britain nor an independent Scotland should be in the EU, don't you?
Well, I think, for too long the Scottish debate's been a false one, because the argument has been that an independent Scotland could be a member of the EU, and we're only arguing about whether they have to reapply or not. You cannot be an independent country and a member of the European Union. I've made that argument for some years, but forget about me. Yesterday, in his State of the Union speech, for the first time, the F word was used. It is going to become a federal Europe. Mr. Barroso was clear. Democracy can no longer exist at a national level. It must be transferred to a European level. And today, another plan's come out for there to be a central treasury to set budgets. So if Scotland wants to leave a devolved United Kingdom and be part of a European Union, it won't be independent, it'll be a satellite of Brussels. And really that, I think, is where the debate ought to be framed.
Christine, a satellite of Brussels.
Well, I'm more concerned that we're a satellite of Westminster just now, because Scotland has no reputation. Hang on a sec. Scotland has no representation in Europe, no representation over fishing. We have huge oil reserves, gas reserves, renewable energy. We have no clout within Europe, and we will have when we're independent and a member of Europe. Now, the second point you make about that you wouldn't be independent, is he claiming that all the other member states of the European Union are not independent? Sovereignty is not absolute. Nations share sovereignty in United Nations, they share it in the European Union by consent and by representation. What Mr Farage wants is, I think it's England because he can't speak for Scotland, to just be isolated from the world and isolated from Europe. Scotland is outgoing, unlike Mr Farage.
Nigel.
I'm sorry. If you want independence, and I believe that is the word that your party's been campaigning for, you cannot be independent and a member of this European Union, especially the one that Mr Barroso outlined yesterday, and arguing to have clout around the table. Well, I would say, what's the point of having clout when your voting rights as Scotland would be about 2.5% of the total votes? But arguing to have influence in Brussels is not the same thing as arguing you can be an independent country, because as you know, as an EU member, all EU law and all EU court judgments are supreme over yours.
Drew Smith, do you think the EU is a democratic union? What benefits does Britain have from being in it?
Well, I believe in the European Union, and I believe in Britain's membership of the European Union. But the reality is that our membership of the United Kingdom means that within Europe we have certain opt-outs, for example, on the euro. Britain's membership of the EU is not conditional on us being members of the euro. We're not part of Schengen. We don't need to be part of the European Common Border Scheme. And the problem that has now been identified today for the SNP with the potential of having to negotiate our membership is that all of these things will again be up for grabs. And as Nigel Farage says, Scotland's voice around that table will not be as powerful.
Christine, what would be the sense in leaving one union to join another, more remote one?
Well, first of all, we haven't got any voice just now, and the idea that to have English ministers representing Scottish fishermen is a nonsense.
Well, Christine Graham seems to want to share sovereignty with everyone but London.
Let me finish. No. The thing about the European Union is that nations are interdependent on certain issues. Independent on others, we control our tax, our benefits, we control our foreign policy, we would be independent. Nations have to negotiate between each other.
Christine, Norway, across the sea from you, is an independent nation, and she has a 200-mile exclusive economic fishing zone. You, as a member of the European Union, whether it's part of the UK or on your own, have exclusive fishing up to 6 miles. That gives you some idea of the power that an independent country could have.
Christine,
I'm glad you mentioned Norway.
Christine,
I'm glad you mentioned Norway because it's got its great oil funds with billions in it.
Talk about
Christine, would the SNP entertain the prospect of leaving the EU to become a truly independent state like Norway?
The position of the Scottish National Party is to be a member of the European Union.
What is your position,
We've been a member of the European Union for a very long time.
Christine, I'm asking your personal opinion. Would you consider the possibility of exploring the option?
I'm fully content with the party's position of being members of the European Union.
But the
And I
SNP's
go back
position of
to
what
the point-
independence seems to mean seems to change all the time, and the closer we get to the referendum, the more the position changes.
Christine, very
No, no,
briefly,
you're
running out of time, very briefly.
I mean, to go back to the point that Drew Smith has to deal with, an independent Scotland and the rump of the United Kingdom will be in
You made that
exactly the
point.
same
We'll have to
position.
leave it there. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us on Scotland Tonight.